Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk. Back in with you guys for another show. No, you're not dreaming. This has actually happened. It's finally happened. The moment we've been, I don't say we as in everyone, but I think that everyone, in terms of a majority, have been waiting for, and that is the fact that Unai Emery has been sacked, and now the managerial merry-go-round begins. And we are chatting to a fantastic journalist today to talk about one of those. But first of all, thank you ever so much for tuning in, people. If you're enjoying our series, make sure you give the show a like and subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. But let's introduce our guest, Richard Hall from Football Italia. How are you doing, mate?
I'm great. How are you doing? You okay?
Yes, very good. Now, Richard, whilst you are a Serie A man, you are also an Arsenal man, aren't you?
Certainly am, yes, for my sins.
So I suppose the easy place to start, before we get into talking about the main man, what we're here for, is what was your initial reaction when you saw Emery get the sack?
I don't think this was a surprise. I think that a lot of the fans, whether agree with it or not, I think it's been coming. I think the one thing we can see with Emery is that you can't question that he's been successful in the past. Especially with Sevilla and the 3 Europa Leagues that he won there. I think when you look back, though, at that setup that he had, and you look at the fact that his sporting director, Monchi, was so influential in that, it was almost a perfect storm that came together, and it was a perfect environment for him to work in. We saw that then when he went to Paris Saint-Germain, after that, he's in a different environment where, whilst he could still win domestically, there was more pressure on him, and he didn't manage to contain some of the big characters in the dressing room. It's a very difficult thing to do. And that's why we see the difference between coaches like him and other coaches, maybe say like an Ancelotti, who's very good with the bigger names. So it's unfortunate it didn't work out there. So with Arsenal, and I think obviously I'm not even going to start mentioning the whole situation after Wenger, but I think all Arsenal fans weren't asking for a miracle. They just wanted to see gradual progression. Probably a lot of them would have maybe given up that free-flowing football to see a much more sturdy defence. But as long as there was progression, and I just don't think that Unai Emery, great, seemed like a great guy, seemed like, I still believe he's a talented coach, but he just couldn't find the way. I don't think he got anywhere close to playing the football that Arsenal fans have become used to offensively, and defensively it was equally as disappointing. So it's probably, for me, no surprise.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about progression because arguably we've gone the opposite direction. Actually, we've started to decline. I mean, I say started. I think the decline actually began a little while back. That does now mean, though, that we are sort of in this sort of limbo period where it looks like Ljungberg is going to be in charge for the Norwich game, I would imagine. I'm not expecting us to sort of announce something before that game. But the main guy, especially Sky Sports, have now put it as their sort of main tip to, and in the betting odds, he's certainly the favourite. He's 1-1 in a lot of the betting odds. And I should say that the people that were showing the support about the bet that we put on, yes, we did put a bet on Unai Emery to get sacked, and we profited quite nicely out of it. But I wouldn't be putting that same bet on Emery right now because I'm not Emery, sorry, on Allegri, because it looks so sure on. How sure are you initially on Allegri becoming manager of Arsenal?
Well, often covering Italian football, there's a lot of managers from Serie A that go over to the Premier League, and vice versa as well. And often I don't like to really be very sure on coaches and say, yes, this one would be a success. But as far as it goes, I don't think there's a better choice for Arsenal. I really don't. Now, the reason I'm saying that is because it completely depends on what you want. Arguably, if you wanted I know there's been talk of Arteta and his he's been tutored by Pep Guardiola, and there is an argument of free-flowing football and a great progression in years to come with that. But right now, for me, after you've had Wenger for such a long period, and then they've tried, obviously, with Emery to get someone to really start to progress the club, and that's how we started this conversation with progression. I don't think there's anyone better than Allegri, and this is for why. His record's outstanding. I mean, the Italian papers at the moment, Gazzetta, Corriere, are all coming out and saying they look as though this is almost 100% going to happen. It's been no secret that Allegri, even when he was at Juventus, had started English lessons. He'd made it very clear that one day in the future he wanted to manage in England. So the want and the will is there to manage in this league. When you look at his record as well, I mean, it's absolutely incredible. At Juventus, and not just Juventus, at Milan as well. He obviously won a title with them before going and winning, 4 domestic doubles, which is no one in Europe's ever done that before. He's the only coach to do that. His win rate at Juventus is 70%, 70.4%. That's the best in Juventus's history. And Juventus is the most successful club in Italy. And then he won an additional title, in Italy in his last season, although he didn't win the double. 2 Champions League finals he's reached, and admittedly the standards were high at Juventus, and they ended up parting ways. But this is a guy that not only is a winner, he's someone who is a good coach. He can do the man management of the top players. There's not much he can't do. The one thing I think Arsenal fans would have to accept a little bit is the style of football maybe not suited to what they've been used to under Wenger, especially at certain parts under Wenger. Defensively, 100% solid. Tactically, he's incredibly astute. But the reason that Juventus parted ways with Allegri was quite simple. They were winning everything, and they wanted to take it to the next level. So they wanted to start playing the Guardiola-style football. Hence, they went for Sarri. So for me, it's a really obvious choice. The guy's a gentleman as well. He really gives a touch of class, which, as we know, Arsenal have always prided themselves on.
I think when Emery came in, a lot of people saw that as, right, he's a guy that knows how to defend, because with Sevilla, they were very stubborn at the back. It's just the reason why they won 3 Europa Leagues. And defensively, whilst I don't think he was anywhere near the level that we look upon Allegri at, but when he came in, I certainly think that Arsenal fans thought we were going to get a coach that was going to help us defensively and improve. Now, that's very clear to say that hasn't happened at Arsenal. So what's the difference between what people perceive to be a defensive-minded coach in Emery and who has been a very successful defensive coach in Allegri?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And when you look at Emery when he was at Sevilla, and I think that's the best part to focus on. As I said before, and I keep bringing up Monchi, I think that Monchi was very in tune of what players that club needed. It's all about structures at clubs. So, for instance, Monchi took a great pride in his work and would look in the windows, and he would give the replacements to Emery pretty much. And Sevilla at that time already were quite a stubborn team. We saw, if we go in Arsenal's history, the transition of the defence with after the George Graham years, and then obviously that stayed a little bit through when Riak and that transition period before Arsene Wenger inherited and benefited. Very similar in Sevilla, what happened with Emery there. Paris Saint-Germain's a different kettle of fish, because obviously in Ligue 1, Paris Saint-Germain at that time was so far ahead. And even then there was criticism when we saw defensively he wasn't particularly fantastic when it got to the Champions League. Now, the difference between Emery and Allegri is that and especially with Italian football, I'll give you a quick example. And if I shouldn't probably quote Patrice Evra on an Arsenal show, but it's quite a worthwhile one to do. He said when he was at Juventus and when he was at Manchester United playing as fullback, the difference was this. When he was at Manchester United, yes, it was more physical. It was faster paced. He could move forward, look around at his teammates, and use his initiative, pretty much go where he wanted. He knew that he just had to cover the wide player ahead of him, and that was pretty much it. But then he goes into real detail talking about under Juventus and under Allegri, and pretty much they work in grids. So it's almost a chess game. Now, Italian football isn't slow anymore. That myth's been dispelled about 10 years ago, and it does move at pace. We've seen that with Rome and Napoli, etc. But what happens is that he knows that when the team moves, it moves as one. So in every single position, Allegri trains them twice a week, and Mancini is very similar. And I've been to Inter and watched Mancini do the training exercises. In the afternoon, they don't even use the ball. It's just where everyone needs to be, working in these grids at all different times. So I think that sort of stability, that experience that he has, will do him the world of good. Also, the biggest thing about it as well, and I just quickly add this one, he has no ego in that sense of he knows that when he comes in, he can keep what's good and then improve on what he already knows.
I think that, and I'm very well aware, my laptop's popped up saying low battery. So whilst you're answering this next question, you may see me scurrying around frantically trying to sort this battery out. I'm intrigued to know, in terms of Allegri, you mentioned about, obviously, Juventus had such good talent at the back with Bonucci and Barzagli and Chiellini, and even bringing in players like Benatia and players like that of that ilk under his tenure. That's a very different kettle of fish at Arsenal. How good would he be at turning around the mistakes that happen so often with these players that have so many errors in them?
I think it's a good question, and it will take time. There's certainly no guarantee that Allegri can come into Arsenal perform miracles and get them into the top four. I mean, I think that no matter what coach comes in now, and anyone on that betting list who you can look at would need time, would need a couple of transfer windows. I think what the difference between Allegri and perhaps some of the other coaches we've talked about or who are linked is the fact that not only can he can get the best out of players very quickly, and I think players, like a Rob Holding, for instance, would really benefit from the tutelage of Allegri and the team that he brings in. You're right, Juventus was a different story because that was a very established team, but I think for Allegri, let's look. He's only 52. I think he would see this as a project. He would very quickly be able to identify the players that he sees moving forward with, and the ones who he doesn't need in this system. So that would be of interest for me to watch develop. Again, he's very much about the unit, the whole team. We've seen in the past, certain players who have been extremely talented at Juventus have been left out, and he took on a lot of what Antonio Conte had originally done with that and kept that work ethic. So he's very, very willing to learn from other coaches. I'd actually, obviously he's been on a sabbatical. I'd be really interested too to see what he's picked up, because he's a great student of the game, and he will have been certainly thinking, if his next job's in England, how he's going to adapt to that and quickly. So I think it would be very interesting to see just how much he'd get out of some of the younger players in the short term.
Let's look at some individual players then, because one of the biggest issues that a lot of Arsenal fans have seen under Emery is the misuse of some of these players. The player that I pick out most of all is Lucas Torreira. Torreira's sort of been playing this role that is more advanced. I got the thinking behind it. You want to try and retrieve the ball as higher up the pitch as possible. However, the issue with doing that is that Arsenal just don't have the personnel to play the guy in behind Torreira playing that role. They just don't have that security. Would Allegri look at the midfield that we have, which is, in my opinion, almost as weak as the defence that we have right now? It's the front line carrying us forward. Would Allegri look at that midfield and say that, right, clearly identifying that Torreira is the most defensive, has the most defensive ability of those players, and sit him in that role and be easily able to direct that guy? Because the news that came out about his agent trying to say that he wants to move on, basically because he's unsettled and doesn't know what he's doing. Do you see that situation changing radically now if Allegri was to come in?
Yeah, definitely. And for that, I think when you look at Torreira and how he played at Sampdoria, he played in that sort of much deeper role. His job there, and you can compare this to the old Juventus teams. When you look at the likes of Blaise Matuidi, Sami Khedira, Allegri liked to have a player that broke the play up. Your job is to break the play up and give the ball. And that is it. And the reason being is in that three-man midfield, he'd also have someone, and we can refer to it when Allegri then changed, got Pirlo to play a little bit higher up. And, the job was of that defensive deep line player, break the ball, break the play up, give it to Pirlo, and then the game would restart again because of the range of passing. That's very much how he sees it. So I think that would be no issue for Arsenal straight away, because there are players in there. Okay, not with the ability of Pirlo, but not many have. But at least that if Torreira can break the play up, others can start that going. It'd be interesting to see how if he'd use Guendouzi as well, and to see how he would develop him. Because I think sometimes, like you said, the midfield can look a bit weak, and some of the players seem to be getting in each other's way. And I know it's a controversial topic, but I'd really be interested to see the progression of Granit Xhaka under Allegri, just to see if he would think that he's got any or the ability to play those passes. So yeah, I don't think that Torreira would be trying to play in a higher role. I think Emery, in a sense, I think that was more out of desperation, what he was doing. Like you say, you can understand the idea, but I'd be very shocked to see Allegri doing something along the same lines.
Focus on that front line then, because when Ronaldo was signed by Juventus, I don't personally think that it's been a massive success with Ronaldo joining Juve. I don't think he's achieved anywhere near what you saw him achieve at Real Madrid. You can see that with his goal scoring, and obviously last season, though he got quite a lot of goals, there was a high frequency of penalties within that as well. In an attacking sense, he's now got access, if he is to join. Of course, we're talking like it's done. But if he was to join, you've got Aubameyang, you've got Lacazette and Pepe. Now, at the start of the season, everyone saw that as an easy front three fit with Aubameyang left, Lacazette middle, Pepe right. Now, we've seen that that's not been the case over the course of the season. It's been quite tricky to sort of balance those front three. How would you see, and what sort of attacking style does Allegri employ, even with a more of an emphasis on defence?
Well, the interesting thing about Allegri is that he's very adaptable. As I said before, when he first took over from Conte, he knew that the 3-5-2 was working. excuse me, and he left it. If it had started the season, he said, well, look, this is working. They're playing. I can assess the players, see how this is going. But they lost at Genoa. And next thing, he brought in his formation, which at the time seemed outdated now. It was almost like a Christmas tree formation. It completely gave him a second option. I don't think that Allegri would come in and completely rip apart the fact of, right, this front three is a trident. It's never going to work, and ditch it. I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't change that much straight away, in the sense of how he'd want to have a look at and I'm talking about the things that are working here, to say, right, okay, let's see if we can do this. But the Champions League, when it's the Coppa Italia, he would try different formations and try different systems. Not as much as Emery's been doing. These are tried and tested ones that have worked before. When you look at it, I can see the evolution of Mesut Ozil would be interesting as well, because he's often light up front. He's played often with two strikers and someone just behind. And probably one of his most successful periods was when he actually played Paul Pogba as a number 10, and that's the player that everyone thought was going to show himself at Manchester United. So I think Ozil could have a completely different role there as well. Maybe utilising a different system. But again, for Allegri, for me, this is why it's exciting, because Allegri would be very focused on that midfield and the defence and shoring it up. And he has the options up front. So for him, he would, he wouldn't be scared of maybe dropping Lacazette for a game and playing Aubameyang maybe on his own. He would mix it up quite a lot.
In the chat box, and feel free, you guys, to please throw some questions in for Richard. Paul Friedman asks about how Allegri's English is. You spoke about earlier on in the show that he's been learning it for a while and he has ambitions to manage in England. How good of a communicator is he, and how much of the language barrier would there be?
Yeah, he has been learning English over the past couple of years because he's always had this in mind. He also, I think it was about 3-4 years ago, more than that, after leaving Milan, he spent a bit of sabbatical, took a bit of time out, and he spent a lot of that in England as well. So, he's really very, very fond of the country. Now, an interesting sub-question to that, which you said about, what kind of communicator he is. This is really interesting. In Italy, he's seen as the archetypal gentleman. He absolutely, with that element, there were Juventus fans, because when Maurizio Sarri came in, I mean, you may have seen him, but that's correct. In Italy, he's a completely different. So Juventus were worried about going from this very classy, very intelligent, very well-spoken, tactical and inspirational coach as well. Somebody that's smoking and has, let's just say, very un-PC in Italy. So they were worried. Yeah. So I think that he would come across, as I said before, or whether go back to Herbert Chapman before, beyond, or afterwards, there's always been that element of class that Arsenal have liked to have, and I think he would certainly give it them.
In the chat, Lee Farrell asked, could Allegri get the best out of Pepe?
Yeah, again, this goes back to when we were talking about how he'd utilise the front three. I think that what he really on, and that's why I'd be interested to see if he did come through in this season. He probably would use part of it to try a few different things to get those players in the positions that he wanted to do. Once he'd done that, like I said, not like Emery, that he's going to keep changing it all the time out of almost desperation. But when you look at what he did at Juventus, and it is the best sort of way to look at it, he did struggle sometimes in where to play. Does he play him a little deeper off the striker? You look at Cuadrado, another really interesting one. He ended up thinking, okay, I can play you either as a wing back or a winger. He likes them to be able to adapt. Going back to when even Carlos Tevez was just off the striker, he does like I could see it being very interchangeable between Aubameyang and Pepe, actually playing off someone like Lacazette. But he will do is he does like players to potentially be able to do more than one job. So yeah, I definitely think, because there's countless examples of players that have gone to Juventus, and you look at this, and even when Juventus have lost players from Pogba to Pepe, always regenerated, brought players in, and it's who he hasn't been able to guest out of. So I'd be fairly confident for most of the Arsenal players in that respect.
If we look, because a lot of people in the chat box, it's fair to say, aren't quite keen on Allegri coming in. They've used the terms Emery 2.0. They said he's too similar to what we've got right now. What would be the big counter argument against those points?
Yeah, kind of touched on it before. Juventus, if I can explain briefly, are a club they want to join. Agnelli wants to join the European Super League. You know, he wants to appeal to the American audiences. He wants to be the next big super club that even supersedes the Real Madrids and Barcelonas. And one thing he needs for that is attractive football. If Juventus didn't play always the most fantastic football we've ever seen, but they always won. So it depends on, as I said at the start, it depends on what Arsenal fans want. If they're going to want a coach to come in and be the sort of next, high pressing coach like a Klopp, or this, playing the midfield like and still producing amazing football like Pep Guardiola, he's not going to be that. What he would do is, as we've said in the past couple of minutes, is get the best out of the majority of the Arsenal players, shore up that defence 100%, and I think he would win them trophies. Would it be always the prettiest football on the way? No, it wouldn't. But again, I'm quite interested to see what he's learned. He's a coach who's young. He's a coach who develops. You look at the difference between Pep Guardiola and the football he played at City to what he changed it to at Bayern, and now he's doing, at Barcelona to Bayern to City. It's very, very different. I think that Allegri would realise that the pace of the game's a little bit different in England. And I think he knew what he would do. But yeah, I can understand. I don't really stand by the Emery 2.0. I think he's a much higher class of coach than that. But I will 100% concede that you're not going to be seeing a free-flowing football. But it depends on what direction you want Arsenal to be in, I suppose.
I think and obviously there's a lot of questions about how he would sort us out defensively. If you want to know the answer to that, you scroll back to the start of the video or watch on replay, because Rich does cover that defensive-wise stuff. In terms of the transition then to the Premier League, it's a league that he's never managed in before. A lot of people have been sort of backing the likes of Nuno or Eddie Howe because of their knowledge of the Premier League. Do you think that he would transition fairly simply, or would there be a lot of learning that Allegri would need to do to make that transition?
It's very difficult to say that, because when you look at certain players moving to different leagues, people say, is a player Premier League ready? Is he in Italy? They say, Aaron Ramsey, when he came across, is he going to be intelligent enough to play in Serie A? So there's always going to be transitions whichever way. We've seen Emery come over and it didn't particularly work, but we've seen many other coaches who never managed in this league come over and do fantastically well. The only way I could answer that is to say that with the intelligence that this guy's got, with some very clear ideas, and as I said before, I think he will have studied and how adapt. He's a student of the game, so I think his knowledge of this league, of the Spanish, quite a lot of coaches anyway. He's a very studious guy, so I wouldn't be concerned about that. I think when you look at, you can use the same argument of Eddie Howe if you would. You could say what experience he managed, the Champions League campaign, or the Europa League, should I say, at the moment. It's very difficult to guess that. But when you look at the pedigree, look at the trophies he won. Yes, it was with a big club. I'm not going to repeat that with Arsenal, but he would certainly, in my eyes, be the best bet to at least get the club on that sort of transition and a way to be making them come extremely, effective. And look, George.
Oh, Rich, sorry, you cut out there for a second, mate. You're back. You only cut out towards the end, though, so we did get most of that in there.
Don't know what happened then. Apologies.
In terms of last couple of questions before we wrap things up. Sorry, there's a bit of a delay now, which means we're going to overlap each other. This happened with Arseblog. Don't worry about it. In terms of where I was going with this, in terms of looking, then you say he doesn't play a pretty style of football. A lot of fans will turn around and say that, that is quite similar to Emery. But in my opinion, I'm assuming that Rich is going to jump back in a second. In you guys in the chat, please do let me know, do you want Allegri at this club, or would you rather someone else come in? So in the chat box, please let me know if you would like Allegri to into this club in the next manager, or would you prefer someone else? Because that is definitely the priority, is that we get someone in that is going to be helping us to improve defensively and move forward. Richard, in terms of the pretty style that we associate with Allegri, how do you define a manager that isn't always going to be pretty? When you said that in your last in the last couple of questions, and you mentioned about how he doesn't play pretty football, what can Arsenal fans sort of expect that to be? Because it's very easy to say that it's not going to be free flowing and dynamic. It's not going to light up the Emirates. But what does not playing pretty football actually mean?
Yeah, when I say that, as I said just before I unfortunately cut off there, don't expect the George Graham years. It's not going to be boring Arsenal again. What I'm saying is it's the managing of the expectations as to what you want. You look at coaches like Paulo Fonseca at Roma, you look at Maurizio Sarri playing extremely good football. When he was at Napoli, for instance, you look at Klopp, you look at Guardiola. They're endless in the sense of this coaches out there, very progressive, playing very quick football. Allegri still, what he does, he makes sure that defensively they are very solid. They build from the back, and the midfield is really key, because what he's doing, he's trying to transition the ball throughout the pitch as quickly as possible, and then let them do what they want to do. But there is a dynamic where each of the players plays for the other one. So it's very methodical in the way he's done it. It's a very clear plan. You can see what he's. You can see that he dominates teams, keep a lot of the ball, keep possession, and win it back extremely quickly. Like I said, I actually think it could be really interesting to watch in the weekend bats some of the other teams in the Premier League, and what does offensively. I think he will have changed and have new ideas, and I think those new ideas in this league will be really exciting, because I think he will understand that he won't be able to play exactly the same game that he did at Juventus, because, as we've already said, he hasn't got the squad, especially defensively. So he will bring something else, could be because he is that particularly astute. So that could be quite interesting. So, like I said, for me, Allegri, I think he'll play good possession-based football. And yeah, it will take time for him to obviously fix that defense, but that counts for anybody. But again, when you look around Europe and you look at the coaches, I think Allegri's up there with some of the very best.
100%. We're going to wrap things up with one more question, and that is a very, very simple one. Out of 10, how would you predict a successful spell of Emery being?
Sorry, that just broke up a little bit. Out of 10, what? Sorry.
So how would you predict, how successful would you expect Emery to be out of 10? Emery to be. Oh, he's stuck in my head. He really is. Allegri.
How successful out of 10 would he be? I think a solid 8. I think a solid 8, and I think if the board back him in the transfer window, and I'm not talking immediately, I do not think that Allegri is going to land at Arsenal after Norwich, and next thing we're all going to be talking about this fantastic team that's reaching the latter stages of winning the Europa League and finishing second. I think this season is almost a little bit of a write-off in some respects, but it's a learning. This for me will be him learning about the club and improving those players initially. But overall, back in the window, letting him go and having the choice and working well with the management there to produce a team over a period of time, I think all Arsenal fans would look for appointments. I don't think it's a gamble in that sense. I think it's one of the most solid approaches. Again, listen, I completely understand that there's a different side and a different approach. And I could understand that maybe some fans are thinking, after what Arteta's learned, for instance, under Guardiola, look at Julian Nagelsmann again, what the football he plays, very, very young, 32-year-old coach, that they might want to go in that direction and look for some, a real new brand of football and maybe something we've not seen at all. So I can understand that as well. But from my point of view, I don't think Allegri, I think he's a very solid choice, and someone who could maybe get Arsenal, he could give Arsenal maybe some trophies again. I think you could give Arsenal a sense of pride. And more, and I keep saying it, I think he gives Arsenal a sense of class. And for me, after the last 18 months, maybe before that as well, I think we've lost a bit of that. So I think he would be a very good appointment. And as I said, he's only 52 himself. He's got time for a successful era.
He's 52. He seems like he'd be older than that. It's a really, really odd one. I feel like he's been around for ages. But yeah, I think that's great what you're saying there. I think an 8 out of 10 is very positive. It's been very, very split, it's fair to say, in our chat box this evening. A lot of people have been talking about Ancelotti, which is an interesting one. And I think a lot of people have been talking about the Premier League sort of experienced managers as well. We've been sort of linked to Nuno for so long, and other managers other than Allegri for so long. They're sort of used to this idea, which I can understand. But again, thanks, Richard, for coming on this afternoon, taking time out of your afternoon to come on the show and give everyone that insight that we desperately needed.
No problems. Thanks for having me. Been good.
No problem, mate. So if you've enjoyed the show, please make sure you give it a like. Please subscribe to the channel if you're new around here, those notifications turned on. And this is your first of 2 uploads for today, pre-recorded a couple of days ago before Emery was sacked. We did a tactical breakdown Q&A pre-recorded session with Stuart Hall, from Wolves Fancast, who is going to be talking to us about Nuno Espirito Santo. So make sure you tune in a little bit later on by turning those notifications on to get that info. We will see you again very, very soon. And as always, up the Arsenal.